Hello all. Today I want to talk to you about what I do with leftover resin after I've completed a project. As a beginner in the resin world, I still struggle with how much resin I need for the project that I'm working on. So more often than not, I mix either too little or too much. But today I want to kind of show you what I do when I do mix too much. Now, when I first started, I would scramble to find a mold. So I never had that ready. I'd scramble to find a mold, pour the resin in the mold, and then scramble to add something to it. So here are some examples of flying by the seat of my pants. Just not knowing what to do with that leftover resin. I have several pieces like this that I hope to be able to repurpose in the future. Now, that was with the clear. I would add something to the clear. Now, if I was working with multiple colors, I would just add those also to the mold. Now, some of those look fine. Some not so much so. And then, of course, the solid. Just a solid color if I had extra. So at first, yes, I was flying by the seat of my pants. But then I started watching more and more YouTube videos, and there's some amazing artists out there, and they have amazing techniques. So I thought, why not try some of those techniques? So I started doing that. So let me move these out of your way, and I will show you some of the techniques I started practicing on. So yes, practicing techniques is another good use of that leftover resin. So here are just a few of the techniques I practiced, and even though not perfect, I know that the more I practice, the better it'll get. I hope you can see that. So that was the second stage, was practicing techniques. Then I started testing stuff for projects. For example, early on I bought a small resin kit that had different kinds of flakes in it that I had no idea what it would look like in the resin. So I started practicing with some of that. Just to see what it would look like in the resin. I also started testing stuff that I wanted to use in resin, just to see what the characteristics were like in the resin and how they would look. For example, these little sprinkle candies, I have a project in mind to use those on, but before I use it on a big project and waste resin, I wanted to go ahead and try to just check it out in a smaller piece just to see how it would behave. I definitely learned, always have stuff ready. Get molds ready just in case, but have an idea of what you're going to use those molds for. If you need anything like pigment or mica, have that ready. So next I'm going to talk about how I prepare some of the projects or items using leftover resin for future projects. So let me move these out of your way. Let me get all those out of the way. All right. So let's talk about future projects. I have many projects in mind, and leftover resin is a good way to prepare smaller items for those projects. Before I start talking about preparing for future projects, I want to talk about one of the things I also do, and that is actually completing projects. For example, on my coasters, I like to add a top coat to it just to add that shine. And so if I've made coasters, I will kind of set them aside. And if I have leftover resin enough to top coat a coaster, I will do that. So that is something I also do, is I just complete some projects. Now let's talk about preparing for upcoming projects. I mean, for example, in the near future, I want to make a sphere of spheres, if you will. So I try to always have, depending on what size I want to use next, I try to have a sphere mold ready. Sometimes I'll have two differing sizes so that I can use the leftovers to create more spheres for that project. I also have a project coming up that I want to try, and that's actually to make a snow globe in a sphere. And like this little Christmas tree, I want to put that in that globe. And as you can see, I have already coated it with resin. I also have another coaster plan in mind. And so I have a piece that I have poured to use in that coaster piece. Now that's preparing for upcoming projects. Something else that I like to do is what I call, in my head anyway, is to have supplies on hand. And what I mean by that is, for example, I cut these cute little candy canes out of wrapping paper. And I cut some little butterflies. Let me pull those apart. See if you can see those. Let me put one up here so you can kind of see it. And those I cut out of cotton material. And they need to be coated before they're placed into resin. I believe they've been called stickers. So I'm just going to call them stickers. So I like to make stickers and have them on hand in case I come up with a project idea. I'll have it ready. I also like to coat things like, let me pour a few of these out here and not all over the place. Can you see that? Those are coffee beans. Because in my next video, I do want to make a coffee bean coaster. They do need to be coated because I did find out through trial and error that coffee beans like to float and they like to bubble. So let me go ahead and mix up some resin, and we'll do a little bit of coating, and I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, I do have the resin mixed. Something I wanted to mention and forgot to do is, for example, the flowers that are in this coaster. You know, once I pressed and dried them, I coated them as well just to have them ready. So that's something else you can consider doing. And I do want to let you know that when we get this process started, it's a bit on the messy side. But let's go ahead and start by adding a little bit of our resin to the beans, just so we can get those stirred up and they can start bubbling and getting coated real well. So I'm giving them a real good stir. And then I'm just going to let them sit there. For now anyway. I will be putting them out on the mat here shortly. So let me set that down. And let's see about coating our stickers. Now on the stickers, you do need to coat both sides. I'm just going to coat one side today because you got to let it cure like you do anything else. That may not be the best thing to use. So let me set that down. And let me see about using this to coat with. And yeah, it is a messy process, but well worth it. You'll have it done and ready for when you need it for your project. And once they do cure, you have to be very careful removing them from the mat because you don't want them to tear. Let's see if we can't get that spread out real well. And it doesn't take a whole bunch. You just want to make sure it's completely coated. And like on these little butterflies, I found out pretty quickly that if you have little parts, like these little antennae things, pulling them off the mat, I've lost more than one, but it looks like I already cut that one off, so let's see about getting these flowers coated. Let me grab a pair of tweezers to help me out a little bit, just to hold it in place while I coat it. Okay. Let's get that coated real well. And I have made some trays with like these flowers in it. I haven't used the candy canes on anything yet. I probably should, because Christmas is right around the corner. And maybe that's why I decided to cut them out, just to have them ready for when I get that idea. So what about you? What do you do if you mix too much resin? I would be curious to know. Please feel free to leave your comments below. Let's get these butterflies done. And then we'll work on the beans. Whoops. Just flip that baby over. Let's turn it back over. And this is something that, okay, I have one side coated, or I will have one side coated. And once they cure, I'll just set them aside for when I have extra resin again, and then get the other side coated. Let me move that. I don't want to spill it. Just the thought of, you know, wasting resin, because it is expensive. And I'm one of those people that I like to, you know, I don't want to waste, but I also like to reuse things, or maybe reinvent them, upcycle. So let's get that candy cane down there so it'll behave. I don't know how well you can see what I'm doing. I will try to bring the camera a little lower once I get a couple of these coated for you. Let me just finish this candy cane and see if it's going to behave, because right now it wants to curl. And, you know, when you do remove them, if you just pick up your silicone mat and kind of bend it a little bit, it makes it a little bit easier to remove, but you still have to be very careful. All right, we're going to stop coating right there. And my flower wants to bend, so let me see if I can get that baby flattened out again. All right, let me give these a clean off, and let me see if I can bring you a little bit lower so you can kind of get an idea as to what I've done. Let me see if we can just do it this way. Let me put you down here so you can see. All right, now the coffee beans. They are messy. They are definitely messy. I want to make sure they're good and coated. Let me use this to stir them real well. I don't know if you can see in there or not, but let me go ahead and start picking them out. And I pick them out one by one. I try to make sure they're separated. Now when they cure, they will cure like a little flat resin piece on one side. So I do try to think about what design I want to use in my coaster before I actually pull these out to cure. I have both dark and light coffee beans in here. And I like to flip, you know, some over on one side, some over on the other. So let me go ahead and get some of these picked out. Also, when they start curing, you have to kind of watch them because occasionally they'll actually get a bubble. Like here I have 2 stuck together. I don't think I want that, but you have to watch for bubbles even though they're just flat on a mat. Alright, I don't imagine you want to sit here and watch me just pick coffee beans out of a cup for hours. So let me just set that aside for a second. Give my hands a little wipe. And just say that, you know, by planning ahead, you'll be able to avoid costly mistakes. Because, you know, you'll have everything prepared. And resin, again, it's not cheap. Prepare for upcoming projects or complete projects, you know, like with the coasters. You can use the extra resin to learn new techniques and create some of your own. So, I mean, what items have you used your extra resin on? I would be happy to hear about that in the comments below. Now, as I said, my next video, I plan on doing a coffee bean coaster. So I hope you can join me then. I want to thank you for watching and ask you to consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Thank you again, and I will see you next time when we do the coffee bean coaster.